The war room floated in silence above the fortress world of Realm 7. Inside the massive chamber, holographic displays showed 17 star systems painted in red. Each red mark represented another defeat, another billion souls consumed by the Void Swarm. Supreme Commander Vakthor stood before the assembled leaders of the Galactic Council. His 4 eyes blinked in sequence as he processed the catastrophic numbers. The Krilthi were a logical species, evolved from hive-minded insects that had learned individual thought. Every decision Vakthor made came from pure calculation, stripped of emotion or bias. We have lost 40% of our combined military forces in 2 solar cycles, Vakthor announced. His translator device converted his clicking mandibles into flat, emotionless words. At current projections, the Void Swarm will reach the core worlds within 6 months. Around the circular table, representatives from a dozen species shifted uncomfortably. The Thelzari, massive reptilian warriors who valued honor above all else, growled low in their throats. The Quendi, delicate empaths with translucent skin, trembled as they felt the fear radiating from every being in the room. Even the normally confident Bracken, whose people had ruled 3 galaxies before joining the council, stared at the displays with visible dread. "We need reinforcements," said General Thralkan of the Thelzari. His scarred snout bore the marks of 100 battles. "But every species has committed their full military strength. There are no reserves left." "Incorrect," Vakthor replied. One of his secondary arms gestured to the display, where a small blue planet appeared. "The humans have not yet deployed their fleets." The room erupted in chittering growls and whistles that the translators struggled to convert. Ambassador David Chen, representing Earth, remained seated calmly while chaos swirled around him. He was a patient man who had learned that sometimes silence spoke louder than arguments. The humans, Councillor Vresh of the Quendi spoke softly, her voice like wind through crystal. They joined the council only 5 years ago. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Their military consists of primitive chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. They have been upgrading, Chen interjected quietly. "We learn quickly." Vakthor's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval. The humans possess 340 combat vessels equipped with council technology. They have offered these ships and their crews. 300 ships cannot change this war, Thralkan said dismissively. "We have lost thousands," perhaps, Vakthor acknowledged. "But we have no other options." Chen stood slowly, his movements deliberate. He was shorter than most species present, his frame weak compared to the armored Thelzari or the multi-limbed Krilthi. But his eyes held something that made the others pay attention. "May I show the council something?" Chen asked. Vakthor gestured permission. The human tapped a small device and new data filled the holographic display. Numbers, statistics, and historical records scrolled past in glowing text. "This is Earth's military history," Chen explained. "Battle of Thermopylae. 300 soldiers held a mountain pass against hundreds of thousands for 3 days. Battle of Stalingrad, a single city defense, lasted 5 months and cost 1 million lives on each side. Battle of Ia Drang. Soldiers fought for 3 days surrounded by forces 20 times their size." The council members stared at the numbers. The casualty rates were horrific. The tactical situations were hopeless. Yet in each case, the humans had fought anyway. "Your species suffers from a psychological defect," Fresh observed, her empathic abilities trying to make sense of the data. "You do not retreat when fear demands it. This is not courage. This is malfunction." "Call it what you want," Chen replied evenly. "But we're offering our ships and our people. The question is whether you'll accept." Vakthor calculated quickly. 340 ships would make minimal difference in the overall war. But every ship mattered now. Every delay against the swarm bought time for evacuation and regrouping. "We will assign your fleet to the Kepler Nexus," Vakthor decided. "It is a strategic bottleneck. Hold it for as long as possible, then retreat before your forces are destroyed." "We'll hold it," Chen promised. "For how long?" Thralkan asked skeptically. Chen's expression didn't change. "For as long as necessary." The meeting concluded with formal acceptance of Earth's military support. As the council members filed out, Vakthor studied the human ambassador. There was something in Chen's biometric readings that didn't match his calm exterior. The human's heart rate was elevated. His palms showed increased perspiration. Every biological marker indicated fear. Yet he had volunteered his species for what was clearly a suicide mission. Vakthor made a note in his personal files to study human psychology more carefully. Perhaps their defect could be useful. Perhaps it would simply mean faster casualties. Either way, the decision was made. 3 hours later, Admiral Sarah Kovacs received her orders aboard the human flagship Defiant. She read them twice, then looked at her bridge crew. They were young, most of them. Earth had pulled experienced officers from retirement to crew these new ships, but there weren't enough veterans to go around. Helm, set course for Kepler Nexus, Kovacs ordered. Maximum FTL speed. Admiral, her executive officer said quietly. The tactical analysis suggests we'll be facing overwhelming numbers. Council doctrine recommends retreat when enemy forces exceed 4-to-1 odds. Kovacs smiled slightly. It wasn't a happy expression. Commander, humans have never been good at following recommendations. Especially not when people need us to buy them time. Yes, ma'am. As the human fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, Vakthor sat in his command center, reviewing evacuation protocols for the Kepler Nexus region. He calculated the humans would hold for perhaps 6 hours before breaking. It would not be enough time to save everyone, but it would save some. He did not yet understand that humans had a very different definition of the word hold. The Kepler Nexus system had been beautiful once. 3 planets orbited a yellow star, surrounded by asteroid fields that sparkled like diamonds in the void. At the system's edge sat a massive wormhole gate, the primary trade route connecting 7 sectors. Now the asteroids provided cover for the approaching nightmare. Admiral Kovacs stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching her tactical display. 340 human ships had taken position throughout the asteroid field. Her commanders had argued about the formation. It violated every principle of Council naval doctrine. The ships were too spread out, too exposed, positioned in clusters that would be easily overwhelmed. Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Supreme Commander Vakthor, her communications officer reported. Kovacs nodded. The Krilthi commander appeared on her screen, his insectoid features unreadable to human eyes. Admiral, your fleet positioning is incorrect, Vakthor stated. You have created 17 separate groups with insufficient overlapping fire support. Consolidate your forces immediately. Negative, Commander, Kovacs replied. We're exactly where we need to be. I do not understand. Council tactics require. With respect, Commander, we're not the Council. We're human. We fight differently. Before Vakthor could respond, alarms blared across every ship. The Void Swarm had arrived. They came through the wormhole gate like a plague. The swarm ships were biomechanical horrors, grown rather than built. Thousands of vessels poured through the gate, each one pulsing with organic weapons that fired acid and living missiles. Intelligence reports said the swarm possessed a hive mind, that each ship was merely an extension of a vast consciousness that existed to consume and destroy. Enemy counted 4,000 and rising, the tactical officer called. Out. On Council command ships positioned safely in adjacent systems, alien officers watched through long-range scanners. Vakthor observed the human positions with growing concern. The humans were outnumbered more than 10-to-1. Standard protocol demanded immediate retreat. Admiral Kovacs, evacuate immediately, Vakthor ordered. Your position is not defensible. Kovacs didn't respond. She was watching her display, counting enemy formations, calculating firing solutions. Around her, the bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. Nobody looked scared. Several were actually smiling. All ships engage at will, Kovacs transmitted. Make every shot count. The human fleet opened fire. Council observers had seen human weapons tests before. They were adequate, nothing more. Upgraded Council technology operated by inexperienced crews. The swarm would tear through them in minutes. But the humans didn't fight like Council species fought. A destroyer named Indomitable positioned itself between 2 asteroids, creating a killing field. When swarm ships pursued, the destroyer didn't retreat. It held position, firing continuously even as acid ate through its shields. When its shields failed, it kept firing. When its weapons overheated, the captain rammed his ship into the largest enemy vessel. What are they doing? Counselor Vresh whispered from the safety of the command ship. Her empathic senses could feel the human crew even from light years away. She felt their fear sharp and bright. But underneath the fear was something else, something that made no evolutionary sense. Excitement, joy, determination so fierce it felt like fire. Across the battlefield, Human ships employed tactics that defied logic. When ammunition ran low, they used their ships as missiles. When surrounded, they didn't surrender or retreat. They fought harder, laughing over open communication channels as they carved through enemy formations. The frigate Relentless lost all weapons in the first exchange. Its captain, a woman named Rodriguez from Mexico City, had her crew collect every spare part, every tool, every piece of metal not essential to life support. They loaded it all into the cargo launcher and fired it at approaching swarm vessels at relativistic speeds. Debris traveling at a significant fraction of light speed became devastating weapons. "This is impossible," Thralkin growled as he watched from the command ship. The Thelzari warrior had fought in 100 battles. He understood tactics, courage, honor. But this wasn't courage. This was something else entirely. 6 hours into the battle, Vakthor expected complete human annihilation. Instead, his sensors showed the swarm advance had halted. The enemy was regrouping, reassessing. For the first time in the war, the swarm had stopped. "Admiral Kovacs, status report," Vakthor demanded. Kovacs' image appeared on screen. Her uniform was torn. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, but her expression remained calm. "We've lost 78 ships. The line holds. Your casualties are unacceptable. You must retreat. Commander, I appreciate your concern, but we're not going anywhere. We were assigned to hold this system, so we're holding it. But your losses are within acceptable parameters for the mission," Kovacs interrupted. "We knew the cost when we volunteered." Vakthor's mind struggled with the concept. 23% casualties in 6 hours would have broken any council fleet. The crews would have mutinied, or their survival instinct would have forced retreat. Yet the humans seemed almost energized by their losses. He pulled up human biometric data that the Defiance medical systems automatically transmitted. Every human on that ship registered elevated fear responses. Their bodies knew they were in mortal danger. But they weren't running. "I do not understand your species," Vakthor admitted. Kovacs' expression softened slightly. "Commander, one of our ancient philosophers once said that courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the judgment that something else is more important than fear. Those people behind the swarm need time to evacuate. That's more important than our fear." The transmission ended. Vakthor sat motionless, processing this new information. His logical mind recognized that human tactics were statistically inferior. They traded lives for minimal tactical gain. They refused advantageous retreat. They prioritized emotion over survival, yet somehow, impossibly, they had stopped the swarm's advance. In his private quarters later, Vakthor began accessing Earth's historical databases. He needed to understand these creatures who fought without regard for basic survival instinct. What he found disturbed him more than the swarm ever had. Humans were persistence hunters. They had evolved by chasing prey animals until those animals died of exhaustion. They hadn't developed to avoid death. They had developed to chase it down and claim it. And now Vakthor realized they were bringing that ancient hunting instinct into space warfare. The moon of Kepler-4 was a dead rock with no atmosphere and barely any gravity. Its only value was strategic. Deep beneath the barren surface, a massive shield generator powered the defensive network, protecting the entire Kepler Nexus system. If the generator fell, the human fleet would be exposed to overwhelming firepower. The Void Swarm knew this. After failing to break through the human naval forces, they adapted their strategy. Dropships descended toward Kepler-4 like metallic rain. Sergeant Maria Torres watched them come. She stood in the command bunker of Firebase Omega, the hastily constructed defensive position surrounding the shield generator. Around her, 200 human Marines checked weapons and said quiet prayers. This was going to be ugly. "Sergeant Torres," a deep voice rumbled behind her. She turned to see Kalresh, a Thelzari warrior who stood nearly 8 feet tall. His scales gleamed under the harsh lights, and his eyes held the wisdom of countless battles. "My honor guard and I will stand with your forces. It will be glorious to die beside warriors such as yourselves." Torres smiled grimly. "Appreciate the sentiment, but we're not planning to die today." "Planning rarely survives contact with reality," Kalresh observed. "The swarm ground forces number in the tens of thousands. We are 300. Mathematics does not favor survival." "Maybe not," Torres agreed, "but mathematics never met the United States Marine Corps." The first swarm creatures hit the ground an hour later. They were nightmares made flesh, biomechanical horrors that combined insect, reptile, and machine into something that existed only to kill. Intelligence reports said they released fear pheromones, that they had been designed to trigger primal terror in any organic being who saw them. The humans opened fire anyway. The outer defensive line consisted of automated turrets and minefields. The swarm smashed through them in minutes, losing hundreds of creatures but never slowing. They moved with hive mind precision, each one perfectly coordinated with thousands of others. Second line, fall back to firebase perimeter, Torres ordered. Her Marines retreated in good order, firing as they moved. The Thelzari honor guard covered the withdrawal, their plasma weapons carving through swarm ranks. Calresh fought beside a human private named Rodriguez, a young man from Texas who couldn't have been more than 20 years old. The Thelzari had fought many species over his long life, but he had never seen anything like this human. Rodriguez fired his rifle with mechanical precision, dropped empty magazines, reloaded, and fired again. His fear pheromones were obvious. His hands trembled slightly, but he never stopped. "You are terrified," Calresh observed between shots. "Damn right I am," Rodriguez replied. "Those things are scary as hell. Then why do you not flee?" Rodriguez actually laughed. "Flee where? We're on a moon with no atmosphere. Besides, my mama didn't raise no coward." The swarm breached the outer perimeter. Thousands of creatures poured toward the fire base, climbing over their own dead without hesitation. The human defensive line bent but didn't break. When swarm creatures got too close for rifles, the Marines drew knives and fought hand-to-hand. Calresh watched a human medic named Chen sprint into crossfire to drag a wounded Marine to safety. Then Chen went back. And again. 6 times the medic ran into certain death to retrieve wounded soldiers. It violated every survival instinct. It was tactically worthless, saving individuals when the battle was already lost. "Why does he do this?" Calresh demanded. "Because we don't leave our people behind," Torres answered simply. "Ever." The battle raged for 3 days. Council Command sent increasingly desperate messages ordering evacuation. Torres ignored them all. The shield generator had to stay online. The fleet needed it, so the firebase would hold. On the second day, when ammunition ran low, the humans started using swarm corpses as barricades. They stacked the bodies 3 deep and fired from behind them. When swarm creatures climbed over their dead, the Marines met them with bayonets and combat knives. Private Rodriguez ended up pinned down beside Calresh in a crater, surrounded by swarm creatures on all sides. The Thelzari prepared for a glorious last stand, raising his plasma rifle and roaring a challenge. Rodriguez somehow was laughing. "You find humor in our deaths?" Calresh demanded. "Nah, man," Rodriguez said between chuckles. "I'm thinking about what my drill sergeant used to say. He'd tell us, if you're gonna die anyway, might as well enjoy the ride. And you know what? He was right. This is terrifying, but it's also kind of awesome. How many people get to fight actual alien monsters on the moon?" Calresh stared at the human. The young creature was shaking with fear. His biometrics showed stress levels that should have induced unconsciousness. Yet he was laughing. Actually laughing. "Your species is insane," Calresh said. "Yeah, probably," Rodriguez agreed. He fired his rifle until it clicked empty, then drew his knife. "But we're the fun kind of insane," the swarm creatures charged. Calresh and Rodriguez fought back to back, the ancient warrior and the terrified young human holding their ground, because surrender simply wasn't an option they considered. Reinforcements arrived just in time. Torres led a counterattack that drove the swarm back from the crater. Rodriguez and Calresh survived, though both bore fresh wounds. That night, in the brief lull between assaults, Calresh found Torres checking on her wounded. "I do not understand your species," he admitted. "I have fought beside the bravest warriors in the galaxy. But humans are different. You are afraid. I can see it, smell it, yet you fight as though fear does not exist." Torres was quiet for a moment. She looked out at the barren moonscape, now covered in thousands of swarm corpses. "We're scared all the time," she said finally. "Every single one of us is terrified. But my grandfather told me something when I was young. He said fear is just information. It tells you there's danger, but it doesn't get to make your decisions. We decide what we do, not our fear." "But surely there are times when fear should dictate action," Calresh argued. "When survival requires retreat." "Maybe," Torres acknowledged. "But not today. Today, billions of people are counting on us to hold this position, so we're going to hold it. Even if we're scared. Even if it kills us." Calresh had no response. His species valued honor, courage, glory in battle. But humans had something else. They had chosen to override the most basic programming in their biology. They had decided that some things mattered more than living. On the third day, when the final swarm assault came, Calresh fought beside humans who sang battle songs and cracked jokes even as they died. He watched Rodriguez pull the pin on a grenade and charge into a cluster of swarm creatures, laughing the entire time. The firebase held. When relief forces finally arrived, they found 300 defenders standing over the bodies of 40,000 swarm creatures. The humans had suffered 60% casualties but had never retreated a single step. Calresh knelt before Sergeant Torres in the traditional Thelzari gesture of respect. I came here to observe human warriors. Instead, I learned what it truly means to be one. If you will have me, I wish to join your Marines and learn your ways. Torres smiled tiredly. Hell, welcome aboard. Just remember, we do a lot of running and training. Hope you can keep up. Admiral Kovac had been awake for 60 hours straight. Her coffee had gone cold 3 times, reheated twice, and been abandoned once when emergency alerts demanded her attention. The Defiance bridge smelled like sweat, ozone, and the particular scent of electronics pushed beyond their design limits. The tactical display told a story that would have broken most commanders. After 2 weeks of continuous combat, the human fleet numbered just 340 ships. The Void Swarm had reinforced. Their fleet now consisted of 2,000 vessels, all converging on the Kepler Nexus. Admiral, incoming transmission from Supreme Commander Vakthor, her communications officer reported. The Krilti appeared on screen. Even through the translator, Kovac could hear the strain in his voice. Admiral Kovac, you must evacuate immediately. Council reinforcements are 3 hours away. You cannot hold against these numbers. Commander, we've been holding against impossible numbers for 2 weeks now. Kovac replied. This is different. Your casualties will be total. Your entire species will lose a significant portion of its military capacity. Vakthor's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of stress. I am ordering you to retreat. This is not a request. Kovac looked around her bridge. Her crew had heard the conversation. They knew the odds. And to a person, they were shaking their heads. Commander, I need to tell you something about humans, Kovac said quietly. We have a saying from ancient history. It goes like this. Victory loves preparation, but she's been known to smile on audacity. We're about to be very audacious. This is not audacity. This is suicide. Maybe, but there are 6 civilian stations in this sector. Those stations are still evacuating. Someone needs to buy them time. Kovac's expression hardened, and humans are very good at buying time with our lives. She ended the transmission before Vakthor could argue further. Then she addressed her fleet. All ships, this is Admiral Kovac. You've heard the numbers. 2,000 enemy vessels are heading our way. Council says we should run. Anyone who wants to leave has my permission. No questions, no shame. This is a volunteer mission now. Silence filled the communication channels. Then one by one, ship captains responded. Destroyer Indomitable standing fast. Frigate Relentless isn't going anywhere. Cruiser Thermopylae holds the line. 340 ships. Not one retreated. Kovac felt something tighten in her chest. Pride, fear, love for these crazy humans who refuse to do the logical thing. All right then. Let's make history. All volunteer ships form up on me. Everyone else continue defensive operations around the civilian stations. Her executive officer frowned. Admiral, what volunteer ships? Everyone's staying. I know, Kovac said softly. I'm giving them a choice anyway. They deserve that. 300 ships detached from the fleet and formed a blockade between the approaching swarm and the civilian stations. 40 ships remained behind to provide direct defense. Kovac designated the operation Thermopylae, after that ancient battle where 300 Spartans had held a mountain pass against hundreds of thousands. History was about to repeat itself. In space, with worse odds, the swarm fleet arrived like a dark tide. Their formations blotted out the stars. Council observers watching from safe distances ran probability simulations. Every single simulation showed the same result. Total human annihilation in under 20 minutes. The humans attacked first. They didn't form a defensive line. They didn't create overlapping fields of fire. They went on the hunt. 300 ships scattered into the asteroid field and used every trick of guerrilla warfare ever conceived. They hid behind asteroids and ambushed enemy formations. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking hard and vanishing before the swarm could respond. They lured enemy ships into traps, collapsed asteroids on them, and used the debris as weapons. "This is tactically insane," Thralkin muttered from the Council command ship, but he couldn't look away. Each human ship fought like it was personal. When the destroyer Indomitable lost its main engines, the captain used maneuvering thrusters to spin the ship in a tight circle, creating a continuous firing arc that carved through enemy vessels like a buzzsaw. When Indomitable's weapons overheated and failed, the crew vented atmosphere to cool them faster, sacrificing life support for a few more minutes of combat. The swarm's hive intelligence had never encountered anything like this. Its tactical algorithms predicted that prey creatures would flee when outnumbered. But humans weren't fleeing. They were getting more aggressive, more dangerous, more willing to trade their lives for enemy ships. Council analysts would later calculate that the average human ship destroyed 4.7 swarm vessels before being destroyed itself. It was a losing ratio, but it was far better than anything the Council had achieved. The battle raged for 2 hours and 40 minutes. One by one, human ships went silent, but they never surrendered, never begged for mercy. Some captains sang over open channels as their ships died. Others told jokes. More than a few said goodbye to families back on Earth. Their voices calmed despite the terror they must have felt. Private Rodriguez, now serving on the frigate Defiant after his ground combat experience, manned a weapons station. When a swarm acid blast melted through the bulkhead beside him, he didn't flinch. He just kept firing. "You know what the worst part of all this is?" Rodriguez asked the alien gunner beside him, a young Quendi named Lesh. "That we're about to die?" Lesh suggested, his empathic abilities overwhelmed by the emotions flooding from every human on the ship. "Nah. The worst part is I won't get to tell people about this later. This would be the best bar story ever." Lesh stared at him. Then, impossibly, the Quendi laughed. It was the first time any human had heard one of his species make that sound. With 15 minutes remaining before Council reinforcements arrived, only one human ship still functioned. The frigate Leonidas, commanded by Captain James Wu. His ship was crippled, barely maneuvering, weapons mostly offline. Around him, hundreds of swarm vessels closed in for the kill. "Leonidas to all Council forces," Wu transmitted on all frequencies. "To any species listening, this is humanity's last ship in the Kepler Nexus. We have held this position for 2 weeks. We have lost 339 ships. We have saved 6 billion lives." His voice was steady, almost conversational. "I want the galaxy to know something. Humanity holds the line. We always have. We always will. Fear doesn't get to win. Death doesn't get to win. We decide what wins. And today we decided that your lives matter more than ours." Vakthor listened from his command ship. His logical mind told him Wu's statement made no evolutionary sense. Species protected themselves first. That was natural law, but then he was learning that humans didn't care much for natural law. "It has been an honor," Wu concluded. Leonidas out. The frigate Leonidas accelerated directly toward the largest swarm vessel. Its remaining weapons fired continuously. When they failed, Wu aimed his ship like a missile and detonated his reactor at the moment of impact. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. Council reinforcements arrived 13 minutes later. They found a battlefield covered in wreckage, both human and swarm. The alien fleet immediately engaged the remaining swarm vessels, who were in disarray, their hive intelligence seemingly unable to process what had happened. For the first time in 40 years of expansion, the Void Swarm retreated. Their fleet jumped away, abandoning the Kepler Nexus entirely. In the Council command ship, nobody spoke. They were all processing the impossible thing they had just witnessed. 300 human ships had delayed 2,000 for 3 hours. It defied probability. It defied logic. It defied everything the Council knew about warfare and psychology. Counselor Vresh, her empathic senses still reeling, whispered, "I felt them die. All of them." They were terrified, but underneath the fear was something else. They were happy. They were happy because they saved people they would never meet. Vakthor pulled up casualty reports with his secondary arms while his primary arms prepared the post-battle analysis. Every human ship destroyed, every human crew lost, 12,000 lives traded to save 6 billion, and somehow the galaxy had changed. 3 months after the Battle of Kepler Nexus, the Galactic Council chambers looked different. New banners hung from the walls. representing species who had never before worked together. The seats were fuller, with military advisors standing beside political representatives. And in the center of the room, where tactical displays once showed nothing but red defeat markers, the maps now showed blue. The Void Swarm was retreating. Supreme Commander Vakthor stood before the assembled council, his mandibles clicking softly as he organized his thoughts. He had spent the last 3 months analyzing the impossible, trying to understand why the war had turned when humanity entered it. Honored council members, Vakthor began, I present the final analysis of human combat effectiveness and its impact on the war effort. Holographic displays filled the chamber. Data scrolled past, showing battle statistics, psychological profiles, and tactical breakdowns. The numbers told a story that would have seemed like fiction before humans arrived. The human species possesses what I have termed tactical insanity, Vakthor explained. They demonstrate the ability to choose certain death if it serves a strategic purpose. This is not courage as we understand it. This is a fundamental rewiring of survival instinct. General Thralkin of the Thelzari growled thoughtfully. I have seen this firsthand. I fought beside humans on Kepler 4. They were terrified but refused to let fear control them. It is the most honorable thing I have witnessed in my 300 years. It is more than honor. Vakthor continued. After the Battle of Kepler Nexus, we observed changes throughout Council military forces. Species who had never shown such behavior began adopting human tactics. More importantly, they adopted the human mindset. Counselor Vresh spoke softly. The humans taught us something we had forgotten. Fear is information, not instruction. We can feel afraid and still act. They proved it was possible. Ambassador Chen sat quietly, listening to aliens discuss his species like they were a laboratory experiment. He wasn't offended. He understood their confusion. Humans had always been strange, even to themselves. The swarm has retreated from 6 sectors, Vakthor reported. Their hive intelligence appears to be recalculating strategy. For 40 years, they relied on fear as their primary weapon. They cannot comprehend self-sacrifice. Their psychological warfare is useless against species who weaponize their own mortality. The room fell silent. The idea that death could be a weapon, that fear could be overridden by choice, had fundamentally changed how every species in the Council approached combat. We have received communication from the Void Swarm, Vakthor announced. For the first time in 40 years, they have requested negotiation. The chamber erupted in shocked sounds. Clicks, growls, whistles, and gasps filled the air. The swarm had never negotiated. They consumed or they died. There was no middle ground. They fear humans, Thralkin stated. Not our weapons. Not our numbers. They fear what we represent. Correct, Vakthor agreed. The swarm is a hive intelligence optimized for consumption and expansion. But humans introduced a variable they cannot process. Prey that hunts back. Creatures that choose death over submission. It has created errors in their decision-making algorithms. Chen finally spoke. So we won by being too crazy to predict? Essentially, yes. Vakthor replied without any irony. The Council voted unanimously to grant humanity the designation of vanguard species. It was an honor that came with responsibility. Human military advisors would now train mixed species units in what was being called human doctrine. 1 week later, a ceremony was held at the Kepler Nexus. A massive monument had been constructed from the wreckage of human ships. It stood 300 meters tall, visible from orbit. Names of the 12,000 dead were inscribed on every surface. At the base, a simple inscription read, "They were afraid, but they stood." Ambassador Chen stood before the monument with Admiral Kovac, who had survived the battle by remaining with the defensive fleet. Around them, thousands of council members from dozens of species had come to pay respects. I never thought I'd see aliens crying at a human memorial, Kovac said quietly. They understand now, Chen replied. We showed them something they'd forgotten. That choice matters more than instinct. That fear is just one voice in a million and we don't have to listen to it. Kalresh approached them wearing the uniform of the human Marines. He was the first alien to join, but 47 others had followed. They called themselves the Fearless Company, though Torres kept telling them they were doing it wrong if they weren't scared. Ambassador Admiral, Kalresh greeted them formally. I wanted to thank you. For what? Kovac asked. For showing us what true strength looks like. My people value honor, courage, glory. But humans taught us that the greatest strength is choosing to act despite terror. His scales rippled with emotion. Private Rodriguez told me something before he died at Firebase Omega. He said his mother taught him that brave isn't about not being scared. Brave is being scared and doing it anyway. I think that is the most profound wisdom I have ever heard. Later that evening, Chen found Vakthor standing alone before the monument. The Krilthi commander stared up at the names with all four eyes. I calculated they would last 6 hours, Vakthor said without preamble. I was wrong about many things. You couldn't have known, Chen replied. I studied your species afterward. Your evolution, your history, your psychology. I understand now why you are this way. You evolved as hunters who ran prey to exhaustion. You developed to override your body's signals to stop. Your minds learned to push past pain, fear, and exhaustion because that was how you survived. Vakthor turned to Chen. But knowing the biology does not make it less remarkable. You turned an ancient hunting adaptation into a weapon against the greatest threat the galaxy has faced. We just did what needed doing, Chen said simply. No, Vakthor disagreed. Every other species runs when the odds are impossible. You charge. Every other species whispers when afraid, you roar. Every other species calculates survival. You calculate purpose. His mandibles clicked in what Chen had learned was respect. I initially thought humans were primitive. I was wrong. You are the most psychologically advanced species in the galaxy. We're just stubborn, Chen protested. Stubbornness in the face of extinction is not a defect. It is transcendence. Back on Earth, recruitment centers were overwhelmed with applicants. The galaxy had watched humans hold the line at Kepler Nexus. They had seen 300 ships delay 2,000. They had heard Captain Wu's final transmission, heard the calm acceptance of death in his voice. Young humans wanted to live up to that legacy. They wanted to be the ones who stood when logic said to run. They wanted to prove that fear didn't get to win. At the Marine Training Facility on Mars, Sergeant Torres addressed a new class of recruits. They were mixed species now, humans, Thelzari, even a few brave Quendi who wanted to overcome their empathic sensitivity to fear. I'm going to tell you something important, Torres said. Being a Marine isn't about not being scared. If you're not scared in combat, you're either stupid or broken. Fear is normal. Fear is healthy. Fear keeps you alive. She paused, looking at each face. But fear doesn't get to make your decisions, you do. When civilians need protection, we protect them. When a position needs holding, we hold it. When impossible odds show up, we look at those odds and say, not today. That's what it means to be human. That's what it means to be Marine. Rodriguez's younger brother was in the class. Torres caught his eye and nodded. The kid had his brother's smile, the same reckless courage hiding behind nervous energy. Your brother died buying time for 6 billion people, Torres told him after class. He was terrified. But he laughed at death anyway. That's the legacy you're inheriting. Don't waste it. In the months that followed, human doctrine spread throughout the galaxy. Not every species could fully adopt it. The Quendi found it too emotionally overwhelming. The logical Krilthi struggled with intentionally ignoring probability. But elements of it took root everywhere. The Thelzari combined honor with human stubborn determination. The Bracken added human tactical creativity to their strategic thinking. Even the Quendi learned to feel fear without being paralyzed by it. The Void Swarm continued retreating. Their negotiators struggled to understand the beings they faced. How do you negotiate with creatures who choose death over submission? How do you threaten beings who have already decided some things matter more than survival? Vakthor's report to the Council concluded with an observation that would become famous across the galaxy. We believed fear was universal. We thought all intelligent species would prioritize survival above all else. Humanity proved us wrong. They demonstrated that the greatest evolutionary advantage is not strength, speed, or intelligence. It is the ability to look at fear, acknowledge it, and then do what must be done anyway. The swarm can be fought with weapons and tactics, but it is defeated by will. And humans have shown us that will is a choice, not an instinct. Fear whispers to every species, run, hide, survive. But humans taught us to shout back, not today. Ambassador Chen read the report in his quarters aboard the Earth Embassy station. Outside his window, mixed species patrol fleets departed for the front lines. Human ships flew alongside Thelzari cruisers and Krilthi destroyers. They were learning to fight together, learning to stand together. He thought about Captain Wu's final message, about Rodriguez laughing in the face of death, about 300 ships holding the line because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy had changed, not because humans were fearless, but because they proved fear could be overcome. They showed that courage wasn't the absence of terror, but the decision that something else mattered more. And that decision, Chen reflected, made all the difference.